Hey, Kyle here. We meet like this again. I, like you, thought maybe we were through these moments. That once we reached a certain point with vaccinations and reopening, that we wouldn't return. We wouldn't have to go back to having some of these COVID update conversations. But over the next few minutes, I want to provide some clarity on how we as Generations Church proceed. Before I do that, I want to share why another video. We could have made a post or simply shared a graphic. And it's for this reason that we're making a video. I want to invite you to pray at this moment, to become more aware of your anger and your anxieties, and to surrender them to Jesus, to practice our value together, spirit over self. And so as I go through this video, I just invite you to pray, not just throughout this video, but as a whole, as we journey together forward, because I believe this is an opportunity for Generations Church. And being completely transparent at this moment, I'd like to have a definitive answer on what to do in light of the governor's new mandate. This is the right way, this is what we should do, with no second guessing. I don't. In some ways, it would be easier to say, no mask, we're just going to proceed, or yes, masks, and with a new mandate, and to officially just pick a side and just move forward. And then shift the blame to the government for whatever stance, whether that's yes or no. But I'm not interested in the blame shifting game. I want Generations Church to practice spirit over self, where we depend on God's Spirit and the Scriptures for our guidance. We don't default to some external reality just because that's what we should do or what we have to do, or reject that because we don't think it's right. I want us to submit our personal thoughts, philosophies, submit ourselves once again to the Spirit and to the Scriptures so that we can respond with joy and love. Now, I haven't always handled the last year well in leading our church in this way, modeling this personally. And for that, I'm sincerely sorry. And I hope today's video reorients us to Jesus and how he shapes our life within this world. So at this moment, I see both sides of the argument, for and against the return of masking mandate. Specifically, the flaws, I think, in both arguments. I understand many of you may not like me saying that. Hang with me for a moment. I see that we are a church, and as it presently stands, the church has religious freedom. We cannot be bound by specific ordinances in light of such constitutional appeal. There are churches that have taken that posture. The idea is that what the governor has shared is a mandate and not Washington law, and moved us towards tyranny. But I'm not entirely sure Peter's words in 1 Peter 2 of being subject to human authority do not apply here, especially since we are not restricted in our ability to practice what we see in Acts 2, fellowship, prayer, the breaking of bread, and devoting ourselves to the Scriptures. Further, we can rely on our freedom in Christ for personal comfort or to be present with others, to be for others, and to present Jesus well to others. Further, I see the points that masking is not prohibited within the Scriptures, and therefore should be done because it is the most loving thing we can do. Every order that comes from our government should be considered and how it affects our followership of Jesus, and it relates the testimony to the hope that we have to our community. I'm thankful that God has given us brains that can create items like vaccines and masks to promote health. But God also calls our bodies his temple, and we must consider how we treat his temple so that we can serve others. See, our hope isn't found in science. It's found in Jesus. And as Paul says, to live is Christ, but to die is gain. To say that masking automatically ensures we are the most loving that we can be to our neighbors ignores the unintended consequences of relational strain, deteriorating mental health, and environmental waste. If we simply abide by masking for the sake of physical health as the default solution, but do nothing to address the other aspects of health, then we aren't thinking holistically or creatively enough. And I believe our church, we can pursue more innovation. We can think about this in a holistic sense. Whether these flaws are exhaustive, because they're clearly not, or even if you have some rebuttal for me that you're arguing in your head right now, well, Kyle, what about this? What about this? I believe the church can lead in our cultural moment by not reducing ourselves to a phrase coined by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks called pathological dualism. This cognitive bias called pathological dualism is where one side is unimpeachably good and the other side is irreversibly bad. Meaning, no matter what the other side says, we will always find what's wrong with them. And when, say, your side messes up or needs correction, we justify and say, well, let's just look for the best. It's not really that big of a deal. Right now, you can do a Google search and come up with articles and facts that can be spun to prove the very point you personally desire to make. Pathological dualism. My appeal is to reframe our approach in light of the gospel. The good news of Jesus' life, death, and coming back to life. See, the gospel says that you are not irreversibly bad, but you can have new life in Christ. And it's not your standard of change. It's Christ's standard of change. Further, we can often have these perspectives or heroes that whatever they say or do is right. And we forget that sin affects every person. Therefore, we can be honest about what parts are true and what parts are flawed. Trey Van Camp calls another perspective that, as we think about this, apathetic deism. Rather than engage in this dualistic worldview, we think the only option then is just not care. I don't care, just tell me what to do, just let the clock tick. That's the deism part. Let's just find the path of least resistance and conflict avoidance. And I really don't care. I don't really want to take the time to think through the implications. And so I'll just do whatever you tell me to do. The gospel does not call us to apathy or indifference, rather to love and good works as a response to how Jesus loved and served us. Unlike prior months, there is much gray area for how the governor would have us gather and respond to the rise in coronavirus cases. And so we are left wanting for interpretation, especially when it comes to things like food and drinks and large gatherings for a long time. And I understand that we all have very different convictions because we all have different stories and experiences and backgrounds. And we've all lived at different lengths of time and in different areas. And so what I want Generations Church to consider are these different stories and experiences. And to think about what's the widest possible net we can draw while following after Jesus. We may be in different lanes on the road, but we can still be heading towards Jesus. And so here's what the guidance says. As of August 23rd, 2021, Washington State requires masks to be worn indoors regardless of vaccination status. We will ask that those within the Generations Ministry Center choose to wear a face covering. State guideline provides exemptions for those who have medical or mental health conditions that prevent them from wearing a face covering. And so if we see you without a face covering, we will assume that you have an exemption and welcome you inside the facility. As always, we want to encourage you to take personal responsibility, to have mutual respect and gospel unity, to live with integrity, to seek the scriptures and the Spirit for how you will respond in this moment. And so if you are someone who has such exemption, I'd ask that you still bring a mask with you. We may have people who would prefer to maintain distance from others unless you have a mask on. So, mask or not, exemption or not, bring one, carry it in your pocket, and maybe ask before you reach out for a handshake or a hug how that person would have you interact with them. And so with the recent rise in positive COVID cases in and around Clark County, we wanted to provide this reminder for the families and ministries of Generations Church. And so if you are experiencing symptoms of COVID, whether or not you choose to be tested, we just recommend that you follow the CDC guidelines, that you watch online, and you participate and let us know how we can pray for you. As always, we want to do our best to be a community of everyday people who are committed to expanding God's family together because of Jesus for generations to come.